ideology is out. Capabilities, colorblind, merit-based, back to basics. It really is a back to basics message. And then rebuilding the military. I mean, President Trump did it in his first term. We're doing it again, making sure what we fund, the capabilities we fund, match the threats we face of the future, not reflexively what we've fought in the past. He's going to be the first president to introduce $1 trillion budget. That's not just spending more, it's also being serious about an audit. It's also finding cuts where we pull out the buy garbage and put in President Trump's priorities. So we're going to invest, a generational investment in those capabilities.
Oh, so Trump is the first president to introduce $1 trillion military budget, but also that he's serious about an audit, which of course sounds contradictory, but not when you suspend all logic and reason, at which point anything can make sense. I mean, think about what Hegseth is actually saying here. Trump increased the military budget, but also that he's the first one to audit military spending. Wouldn't that suggest that the budget would go down since all that waste, fraud, and abuse would be rooted out? And of course, there was no audit, meaning that Donald Trump lied, Hegseth lied, Musk lied, and the American people will yet again shoulder the burden of our tax dollars going to bloated military defense contractors despite seven straight failed audits. The only difference is that Trump and Hegseth fired a bunch of black people under the guise of ending DEI, and so now it'll just be primarily white people taking your tax dollars and throwing it away on God knows what, because that's something an audit would normally expose, but despite Pete Hegseth's claims, it never happened.
It may take into 2026, if I'm being honest about it, to really uncover everything, but there will be accountability. We're committed to it. We will not leave a single stone unturned.
Speaking of a date in the future, the Pentagon has missed something like 8 audits in a row. When you sat on my side of this chair, we all talked about the amount of money going into the Pentagon. The budget is roughly $900 billion. I believe you've asked for close to $1 trillion in budget, and yet at the same time we hear about things like DOGE. Can it come in and make it more efficient? What can you tell the American people about the Pentagon budget?
We're gonna get an audit of the Pentagon before this president leaves office, which no one said was possible, by the way. It's failed 7 straight. Only Marine Corps has passed it. We're pulling the lessons of why the Marine Corps works and applying it to the other services. Your staff will tell you. It's something I'm focused on all the time, is where are we in the audit? So anything we promised in the confirmation process or on interviews, it's on a list. It's being executed relentlessly.
Although I must say, this administration did manage to find time to gut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, which exists solely to protect consumers from predatory financial institutions and banks, and has returned $21 billion to over 200 million consumers. It found time to gut USAID, which for 0.5% of the budget delivers clean water and food, HIV prevention, and soft power to the rest of the world. It found time to gut inspectors general in almost every single agency and department. It found time to eliminate every single check on Elon Musk's businesses. But the most bloated agency of all, the one that's failed 7 audits in a row, yeah, they get a pay bump from the roughly $800 million range to $1 trillion now. It's almost like, and bear with me on this one, it was never actually about eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, and always about helping Elon Musk eliminate any barrier to his consolidation of more wealth. Why? Because he paid for Donald Trump's 2024 victory, and this is Trump making good on his end of the bargain. Don't you all see? Trump's agenda has nothing to do with any of us. It's not about helping regular Americans. It's not about adding jobs. It's not about lowering healthcare costs. It's not about making groceries or housing or rent or eggs more affordable. It is solely about helping the ultra-wealthy get a little bit wealthier. That's the agenda. Help Elon because he helped Donald Trump. Help military defense contractors because they helped Donald Trump. Our government has devolved into a full-blown kleptocracy, and they're not even trying to hide it. Want to get ahead? Give Donald Trump a $400 million plane for his personal collection. That's how it works. He promised to drain the swamp. This dude is living in it. He is neck deep in sewage. And he got there on the backs of Americans who believed the bullshit that he was spewing during the campaign about helping them. He doesn't care about you, and he never will. This guy is in office to help a very, very, very small sliver of the population, and chances are really high that it doesn't include you, because Trump's priority is not me or you or any regular American. It is himself and the people who paid enough money to get him to where he is today.
I could be here all day.
I just love talking to you guys.
We could. That's okay. We've been very excited to do this interview. We're big Katie. We get asked for a lot of interviews. We don't really do interviews,
well,
but we're
thank
very
you.
big fans of you, and
Thank you. I
we were looking
appreciate
forward
it.
to this.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. It's no secret that one of the things that propelled Donald Trump to victory in the last election was right-wing media, a potent combination of conservative cable, podcasts, and social media influencers. Now progressive voices are trying to make sure that their footprint is as powerful and as big. The Mycelis brothers have created the Midas Touch Network. That's right, one of the few digital networks to crack the code, gaining millions of followers and even beating Joe Rogan to be the #1 podcast on Apple Podcasts a few months back. So I'm very excited to talk to them about what they're doing and how they're doing it. First of all, hello guys, welcome to Next Question. Thank you so much. An exclusive, the first time the three of you have done an in-person interview together, right?
Absolutely, first time.
Wow, I'm very honored and very flattered. And I wanted to ask a little bit about your life story. You all grew up on Long Island. You all had your own respective careers. Ben, what were you doing before you decided to embark on this venture?
Well, I was a lawyer. I went to law school at Georgetown Law, was a civil rights lawyer, and I was working civil rights cases out in the Bakersfield, Fresno area, representing families who lost loved ones in police brutality cases.
Wow.
So it was through that work that I ended up meeting Colin Kaepernick. And Colin Kaepernick took a knee for police brutality to bring attention to it. And then from there, the pandemic happened and the Midas Touch Network kind of sprung out of it. But my background was a lawyer. I think my parents were surprised when I went into podcasting, but I think they're happy with it now.
I'm sure they are. How about you, Brett? What were you doing?
I was in film and TV, so I moved out to Los Angeles to go to USC, and I was in film school there, and then I graduated, freelanced for a bit, ended up working for the Ellen DeGeneres Show, was an editor there, ran the digital department post-production team over there.
You guys were really early adapters for like digital content. I remember Ellen doing such an incredible job. So you knew, gosh, a lot of people aren't watching the show at home. We are going to make sure that everyone sees it online.
And I got to give them a lot of credit, and the producers there a lot of credit. They saw that incredibly early on, and what ended up happening was when I got there was a team of like 5 people. I was the new guy. There was like, 4 or 5 other people. By the time I left there, we had a team of, I don't know, if you include, kind of other staff kind of associated with it, probably more like 80 people there. And so I saw this entire division of digital blossom, and I got to be there while it happened. And I never thought that editing and helping to create videos that may be about human interest stories and cat videos and whatever we were doing there would end up apply to making political videos, but somehow I think it ended up being a great education actually in doing that. So.
I'm sure it did. Meanwhile, the baby, Jordy, tell me what you were up to before you got involved in this.
Marketing and advertising, actually right here in New York, heart of Times Square, this agency called Translation. Incredible agency. I like to say that they gave me my PhD in New Age marketing. It was really awesome. It was a nimble operation over there. I think they had less than maybe 80 to 100 employees when I was there. And so you got to wear a lot of different hats. So from the creative department to strategy to account management, just kind of seeing campaigns, taking them from the earliest stages of development and seeing the whole execution all the way through. It was really, really cool. And seeing how they kind of used new age tech and social media to really emphasize and reach their audience in different ways. It was eye-opening at the time.
So you all, your skill sets really complement each other. You all bring something different to the table. And so it's the pandemic. You all are getting increasingly frustrated by what you're watching unfold.
To say the least.
And Ben, what was your aha moment? Like, we have to do more. And how did you all come together and say, let's launch this new venture?
Well, you heard our backgrounds. We're not political people. Missing from those backgrounds was stories of working in politics. We're just people who were scared. During the pandemic, we were nervous. We were worried about our families. We were worried about our friends. And we were sending each other text messages about what we were going through. And so we said, how do we translate those messages into we almost felt selfish if we didn't bring what we were talking about to the public. So we just started saying, what if we wrote about this? What if we started a blog? What if we used Brett's skills, who could do videos and editing? What if we used Jordy's marketing skills and just start telling people, here's what we're feeling, here's what we're experiencing, you're not alone, we're a family, and here's what we're trying to do to help each other. So we start releasing a article, a video that Brett edits. Jordy helps coming up with some of the framing of it with his marketing skills, and it seemed to resonate because nobody had really seen a focus on these topics that really focused on the human experience as opposed to just kind of an overtly political side to it. So people had this kind of, aha, like, I feel that way too. And once we started seeing that, the shock to us was like, wait a minute, no one else is really talking like that and connecting in that way. And so we did it again and again and again. And from there, it just kind of kept on growing. A video did 100,000 views, then 1 million views, then 5 million views. And from there, it kind of sprung up, and a community started developing around it, and the months progressed, and we started seeing that this was actually having a real impact.
And then you sort of broadened your aperture, if you will, and kind of started focusing on all kinds of things, not just obviously COVID and the vaccine or misinformation or how you were feeling and what was upsetting you, but the political spectrum in general, right, Brett?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think we just, we were trying to share our lived experience with everybody out there. And so when we saw something that we thought was crazy, we would just be like, isn't this crazy, everybody, what we're watching together? Like, is it just us? And like, I think for a while we were all just looking at each other like, I don't understand, like, why is this being treated like this is normal? Especially it was during the time when, Trump was saying there's 15 cases going down to 0. It's never going to come to our shore. It was just lie after lie after lie. And I was like, we were all like, this is going to be bad, right? And then we just kept seeing, all the kind of political ramifications stem from there. I think that was a very kind of pivotal moment in shaping people's beliefs. And in addition to just COVID, I think a lot of people at that point were sort of being siloed into different kind of groups at that point. And there was a deep division that was kind of being kind of put into our society, and people were kind of falling
reinforced by their own self-selection or algorithmically reinforced.
And the fact that everybody was home and everybody was not speaking with each other. And so as we developed this,
they were mad too. People were pissed.
People were mad for all different reasons. I mean, some people were mad that they had to, be home. Some people were mad that, why don't they just take the vaccine? Why don't they respect my space? People were all mad at each other for all different reasons. And so there were these communities developing. And so community became an essential aspect to us, more so than the politics of, are you able to kind of assemble a community that's based around kind of positivity and wanting to do the right thing, rather than a lot of these sort of more malicious online communities that exist out there that seek to kind of sow division and hatred. And during that time, there was definitely, a lot of that. And so as we built kind of Midas Touch, that community aspect was almost more important than us saying, here are our political beliefs and here are these political stances, but more like, hey, don't y'all want things to be normal? Like, can't we see that this stuff is freaking nuts? And like, if we could all just rally around that, like maybe we could actually put those political differences aside in many ways. And so as we progressed, one of the things that we saw was that, there were folks who may consider themselves, as liberal as could be joining us. Then there were folks who consider themselves Republicans or former Republicans who were joining us. Independents. We saw, people coming to us for all sorts of reasons. But at the end of the day, I think the core was people just wanting things to be like normal again.
Right.
And understanding that what we're seeing then, and by the way, what we're still seeing now, is not normal.
I was going to say, I wouldn't necessarily say, and you can correct me if you disagree, that your content exudes positivity at this moment in time. And I feel like you have gone through various iterations. Jordy, during the Biden administration, were you guys a little more dormant? There were fewer things for people of a certain political persuasion, I think, to be outraged about. So did your growth really explode after the election of Donald Trump the second time?
No, I would say we saw our strongest growth period when President Biden was president during that era. I think it's a slight misconception about what we do that, maybe like just angry, at the world or anything like that. We really just try and bring folks facts and data. And it's sort of that approach that has led the community to grow. When you watch our videos, for example, Ben will say a couple sentences, he'll just say, play the clip. Because playing the clip many times is way more effective than Ben explaining every little slight detail and maybe even giving his opinion in that second. If people would just take away the receipts from the videos and we let them form their own opinion, that's where we've genuinely seen the most growth of the network and of the community, because it speaks to really the values that we care about. We just want things to be normal. We just want people to, live their lives and be happy and be able to enjoy it without some lunatic screaming in their face every 3 seconds. And so I think we've seen tremendous growth during the Biden administration, and we continue to see growth right now as well. But again, I think people are always coming to us for the facts and for the data, and that's what it's allowed it to grow.
I think because we've been there now for about 5 years, people shut off after a lot of people shut off after the last election, and they were looking for fighters, and they were looking for people to stand up to them. And I hope we've always been authentic to those same values when we just started this out in 2020 as what we're doing now. So as we were out there still fighting, and I think a group of people lost a lot of hope after this election. So they turned and they saw what we were doing, and I think that also helped give them hope, which allowed a lot more people to maybe notice what we were doing now. And also we were doing things on the digital realm that a lot of people are adopting now.
Right.
I mean, our YouTube strategy, our focus on simulcasting videos and audio was just a different way to even kind of approach this space, which also I think has been a bit kind of pioneering. And we could talk about that later, but that's part of, I think, where we're seeing, and we're humble and grateful for it, but some of the recognition is, lots of people didn't even know what we were talking about when we were saying simulcast.
Right.
A year ago or more, and now that's the new lingo.
If a Martian landed on Earth and you had to explain to him or her what the Midas Touch Network is in, an elevator pitch, how would you do it? Who wants to take that?
I mean, I think it's a podcast that's fueled by a community, and the community.
But it's not just podcasts, I guess, as we know, are video and audio, but it's sort of, you're doing everything everywhere all at once, right? But sorry, the Martian interrupted you. Go on.
No, it's the community is built on, I think core values and principles, and that's what's the success. And what we're trying to readjust everybody to remember is that the Martian's I may have lost the Martian in my elevator speech right there, but I'll give you my academic speech to the Martian. Okay. I'm assuming the Martian's academic, well-educated Martian.
Ben's a professor here.
He's a professor, so
got a PhD on Mars. Go on.
Exactly. But I think politics has been gamified into you're this team, you're that team, you're angry, yell at each other. And the viewers left a little bit confused. Wait, what's even the issue? And they try to pick what team do I like based on the style of the fight and the style of the debate and who's winning that fight. And that's the split screen cable news, yell. So we try to deconstruct that. And we come with an opinion, and a strong opinion, but we try to root it in a trial lawyer approach. Here's the evidence, here's the exhibit, here's why we feel this way. Agree with us, don't agree with us, but here's what we're grounded in. And so rather than have a 4-minute segment of yelling with 30 seconds of the actual news, we try to root it in 11 to 13 minutes of the facts with opinion, but it's the facts that drive it.
Well, what I would say to the Martian, I would say that, but also one of the things I think you all do so effectively is connect the dots. In this crazy fragmented media landscape, with so much happening, particularly in the early days of the second Trump administration, I think what you do so artfully is you kind of connect, you thread all these things. If an expert's saying this, and then Caroline Levitt is saying that, or someone, Not a big fan.
Caroline.
And you know, you're taking all these different things and you're kind of helping people understand in aggregate what all these moments mean.
That's why you're Katie Couric.
No, is that sort of your goal?
Yeah, it's funny because we were speaking about this, I think, like just yesterday, that there's so much noise out there. And I think we all thought, if we went back, I don't know, even 10 years ago, but probably more than that, probably thought, oh, with the internet, with digital media, with all this stuff, there's going to be so much information. People are going to be so well informed. People are going to be smarter than ever. They're going to be on top of everything. It's going to be so clear to know what's true and what's fiction. It's clearly like the opposite at this point of what we're seeing. There's such a deluge of information coming at people every single day. So I think one of the things that we do try to do is what you just hit at, which is how do we cut through that noise with a message that's clear, that could resonate, that gets the truth across in the midst of just all of this chaos that's coming every single day. Certainly that's been ramped up since Trump's second administration, where I think part of their strategy is also to flood the zone. I mean,
of course,
you think
Steve
back
Bannon
to what
says
Steve Bannon, you think back to what Bannon said in 2016 or whenever he made that statement, flood the zone with shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on this show.
we curse occasionally here.
And that's definitely been their strategy this time around as well. Just do so much that it's almost impossible for an average person to try to keep up with it. But that's one of the things we try to do is really center the conversation on, these are the distractions, these are the important issues, these are the things that are actually going to affect you, your family, your friends, your coworkers. These
or
are
just things you really need to understand.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think you're right. I mean, a combination of things is making it so difficult to stay informed. And a story that happened 4 days ago, the country has moved on, and it's like, hey, whatever happened to the Associated Press getting kicked out of the White House press room? And what about all these right-wing media influencers who are now taking over seats that once belonged to legacy media? Would you describe yourselves as journalists, curators, producers, or do you think there isn't really a category for what you do? Jordy, you're smiling. Go ahead.
I've never thought of it like that. I view us as concerned citizens, first and foremost. We just want to
They're building a media empire.
Well, the funny thing about that is, Jordan, I don't mean to...
No, go for it.
When we do we don't do a lot of interviews about ourselves. So we're actually not that, and I mean this sincerely, reflective on like who we are, because we center the network around the community and around the message to the people. So it is always, interesting sometimes, and lately we don't do a lot of interviews, but sometimes when we're reflecting on like who we are and what does it mean.
But maybe just think about, instead of you guys like as brothers, sort of who is the Midas Network, right? You know? And I guess it's a lot of things, right?
Yeah, and it's most importantly, it's been built on the community of people in America and frankly people around the world who are concerned about the human condition and experience. That's how I would say it very succinctly. But I think we are a media network. We run a media network filled with some of the best reporters out there. We have a great editorial team that breaks stories. I consider what I do on a day-to-day basis. I'm reporting on the news. We break exclusives. We report on news that happens. And, we try to contextualize everything as best we can. That's how
I'm wondering, could you do what you do without legacy media? In other words, I know you use a lot of clips from MSNBC or Fox or CNN. You use reporting. And then I think you make it understandable. As I said, you cull from a lot of different sources and kind of give people the big picture, at least in a lot of the content I'm looking at. But the big beef, while legacy media gets trashed and everything, is a lot of these content creators and even digital media networks could not do what they do without, with all due respect to the reporters you have, but with this vast array of legacy media organizations that are covering the world, who are interviewing Scott Galloway on CNN or doing something else with some other expert from you might run a clip. So I'm just curious how you feel about that. If legacy media poof went away, I don't think you could do what you're doing.
I don't know. I mean, I think that a lot of the things that we find are on social media. It's what
Right,
people are
or
posting.
hearings on Capitol Hill.
Capitol
I was
Hill.
thinking about that.
You know, so I would say there's maybe 5 to 7% of what we do is maybe commenting on an interview that's on a cable news, legacy news network. But I don't think that drives the network even a small fraction. I mean, the majority of it is people are out there saying things either on social media, on their own TikToks, on their own Instagrams, on their own X accounts or whatever. They're putting press releases
people are
out.
saying things on Capitol Hill, like Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Yeah.
claiming that guy was flipping the bird. Did you? You guys, I'm sure, did a story on this.
We did that. The deceptive photo where Representative Stansberry ended up showing the actual photo.
And
where
then was that
two
her?
fingers.
Who was holding it
I
up
think it was.
behind Marjorie?
I think it was her. Was it?
It was Marjorie Taylor Greene had the big poster board of the head of USA Fencing.
Right.
Why they brought in USA Fencing, even though they received no federal funding, is because there was a Fox story saying that there was a transgender fencer. So the whole conspiracy is that they wanted to punch down on a marginalized community using the fencing guy. So they showed a photo of the head of USA Fencing in a Doge committee, and he had a peace sign, or he had 2 fingers up, and they edited it out to look like he was giving the camera the middle finger, and they said, look, he's giving you all the middle finger. And then Congresswoman Stansberry said, no, let me show you what the photo is. You know, it's actually a peace sign.
That was so crazy, remember? And Marjorie Taylor Greene just hitting
Banging
the
the
gavel.
See, but that's the kind of thing, like, to me, I don't care what your politics are. Like, that's not okay. You know, and we should all be able to acknowledge that that's not okay at the end of the day, to do that kind of deception and to try to punch down at people like that. And so I think that's at the heart of, you know, a lot of what we're trying to get across here. But, you know, I think one of the other great examples too, and, you know, I think legacy media certainly plays a tremendous role, and I think there's some, you know, excellent reporters out there who do a really, you know, terrific job, and I commend their work, you know, and especially the reporters who are out there in these war zones and reporting on these international stories. You know, I have so much respect for the stuff they do, but I will say also, you know, a lot of the bread and butter of what we've done, especially throughout the past few years also, is looking to like the firsthand documentation ourselves. And so I think one of the great examples, and one of the reasons I think Ben is so good at what he does, is with his background as an attorney. One of the things that we do is we'll go through court filings, for example. And so during all the various court cases over the past few years, and even everything that's happening in the courts right now, because, you know, there's a whole lot of legal stuff happening right now in the various
keeping
courts.
you very busy, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and we started a whole new channel, Legal AF channel, because we had so many legal stories.
Right.
And so we have a whole channel now specifically dedicated to the legal. But on those, the attorneys are going through the source
That is often
documents, the
seen in
court
120 when
filings.
you do
You
the
know,
100
this
coin
judge
star.
said this. Their
For this-
argument is this. They're analyzing it, and so I think that is at the heart of it. And I think one of the things our format allows us to do that may not be as conducive to a 24-hour news format or a kind of a TV news format is we could go there and we could sit there and we could say, pull up the filing. We could read an 8-page filing, and our audience likes that. It probably doesn't make good TV,
Yeah.
but our audience likes us going through, okay, now let's look at the footnote on page 3 and let's go to the paragraph on page, and they like Ben.
I'd probably turn the channel at that point.
But our audience, you know, likes that because they like seeing what's actually being said, and I think sometimes it's the most revealing rather than, you know, you hearing what I have to say about this topic.
Right.
Let me tell you what the judge actually said here. Let me tell you what the Trump administration's argument actually is here, and then you be the judge of what the truth is.
So fair enough. You guys do a ton of original reporting, and not just on clips, but that you see on cable news. In fact, I thought it was funny. I know that you hired this guy, and he is sort of like, how can I explain him? He's sort of
Talking about
like
Asen?
the truffle.
Asen.
Yes, the truffle sniffing
Oh, yeah.
dog who can figure out like what is going to be the big story and kind of does clip. And I read one of you said something like he's so undervalued as the best cable news producer in the business because in a way you all are setting the agenda for at least more progressive cable news networks, and I would imagine even more conservative ones that are often reacting to more progressive ones, right?
Well, one of the things that we notice, and it's a funny thing to see, is that, you know, Asen, who's one of the most brilliant people on the planet.
Yeah, I might have to hire Asen away.
He truly is a savant. When you see what he does with like the 8 screens, and he sits there for like 18 hours a day.
Oh
like,
my God.
Talk about how a couple of years ago, I just learned about this today, and I really want to share it. We're going to talk about how, for a brief period of time there, the Earth rang like a bell. Literally, the planet. So here is my question, friends. I'm going to leave you to speculate about this. I'll tell you the answer at the end of the stream. But I want you to imagine that the Earth rang steadily every 90 seconds for 9 days in the year 2015. Every 90 seconds for 9 days, originating from Antarctica, the Earth rang. I'll tell you why in a little while. It is not the moon. It's not the moon, it's not the tides. Now, earlier this stream, I asked you a question. I told you about a story about how in 2015, the Earth rang. Or sorry, not 2015, 2023. I got my year wrong. The Earth rang. Every 90 seconds, as regular as a metronome, the Earth shook. It originated in Antarctica. But it was picked up as far as the Arctic. It was picked up all around the world. So the question is, what would cause the Earth to rumble on an incredibly regular timeline? For 9 days, the Earth shook and rang every 90 seconds. What would do it? So this is called a US. So this is all based on a Twitter thread from Mike Soden. I will share it in a second, but I'm enjoying the reveal here. So this is called an unidentified seismic object, a USO. And so this led to a huge collaboration. I'm going to put it on screen here so you can see. Ooh, nope, not there. It led to a huge collaboration between 68 scientists from 40 institutions in 15 countries trying to find the signal's source. And so what they found was originating from here. The King Christian X land in eastern Greenland. I said Antarctica. I had it backwards. The Arctic. It was outlined in red is this. The Dixon Fjord. First surveyed in 1899. A glacier forming the back wall collapsed, plunged 25 million cubic meters of rock and ice into the waters of the fjord, which created a cataclysmic mega tsunami, 200 meters tall, sending 100-meter waves. That's not where it's weird. The tsunami bounced back and forth in the fjord for 9 days. It's called a seiche. Literally just a huge tsunami that went whack into a wall and then went whack into the other wall and then whack into the other wall. 90 seconds at a time for 9 days. Want to see? So that is what's going on in Dixon Fjord. It just instantly goes, I'm going to mute this because I bet it's copyrighted. But the fjord literally just went bonkers and sent out ripples around the world on 90-second intervals. And so the whole world was like, why are there perfect 90-second intervals on the Earth ringing? It's because this literally just went bouncing back and forth across the fjord for a week and a half. How freaking kooky is that? Nature.
22, and I thought they'll go do their own thing and I'll get some work done in the hotel room. Y'all, the internet was slow as molasses. It took me 3.5 hours to upload one video that I had filmed before I left. And then the second video, it took all night, overnight for it to upload. And so I was like, well, I'm not getting any work done here. But you know what, guys? It was wonderful to take a break. I actually went and hung out with my daughters. We walked the campus for a long time. And then we went and ate dinner in West Eugene, I think. We ate at the Eugene Burger Company. They have smash burgers, which I'm a big fan of smash burgers. We don't eat out very much as a family because for many, many years we just couldn't afford it, but also because I love to cook and also because I'm an incredible pinch penny. I'm very, very frugal and I generally don't want to eat out if I can just make it at home. And again, like for many, many years, it was just not something that we could afford ever. But it's really nice now that I'm older and more financially stable to be able to treat my adult daughters to things that they couldn't have when they were little. So we had a nice low-key dinner and then we walked back to the motel and we hung out and watched some internet comment etiquette. I've said this before, but I think Eric Salvia is single-handedly responsible for saving scores of young men from the alt-right pipeline. And then we got like no sleep and then got up this morning and did a tour of University of Oregon. We had lunch at Pho King. I'm going to say that very carefully with a space in between. And I had the best Vietnamese coffee. The coffee at the motel was really weak and bad, and I am a terrible caffeine addict, and I was feeling it by the time the tour was over, and I was like, I have to have some caffeine. And B had pointed out that there is a yarn store across the street, and I'm always going to try and support my local yarn shop. I don't buy very much much yarn at all as a spinner. Most of what I knit is hand spun.
Romania has spoken. In their major presidential election, they have rejected the Trump and Putin-backed far right-wing candidate George Simion. Instead, the pro-EU, pro-democracy centrist candidate who's currently the mayor of Bucharest, Nicusher Dan, is going to go on and win this election. 95% of the vote has been counted, and Nicusher Dan is taking a commanding lead with 54% of the vote to George Simion's 45% of the vote. Romania has spoken. They want closer ties within the European Union. They want democracy. They want to support Ukraine. This is a massive loss for Donald Trump and MAGA, who supported George Simion, who modeled himself as Romania's Trump, as Romania's MAGA. This is a massive defeat for Vladimir Putin and for far right-wing autocracies across the world now. George Simion, modeled in the kleptocratic, despicable, vile model, is not conceding. Instead, he's declaring victory despite losing. He has posted on social media in Trumpian fashion, "I am the new president of Romania," despite losing. Now, this has also been amplified by RT, the Russian propaganda network, as well. But let's be very clear, Nicusher Dan is going to go on and win this election. As I mentioned, the mayor of Bucharest, a centrist, a math Olympiad, has a PhD, a brilliant, soft-spoken man who supports democracy. Now, if you looked at the odds a few days ago, George Simion had a 75 to 80% chance of winning. After all, he won the first round of Romania's election back in early May. Then right before the elections were to take place, we saw George Simion's odds of winning slide to about 54%. 2 hours ago, there was a complete reversal. Now, you may be used to seeing the polling look like this, although it looked a little bit not as all of a sudden fashion like this. But when we showed you how the far right-wing party in Canada lost after leading in the polls. Same thing in Australia. Their far right-wing party lost after leading in the polls. More repudiation of MAGA, more repudiation of anyone who doesn't support Ukraine, and a major repudiation to sympathizers of Vladimir Putin. Let's take you to the scene of Bucharest right here, where the people are celebrating. Let's watch this. Let's play the clip. So what happened in this election to lead Nicusher Dan to go on to beat George Simion? How did the centrists pull off this upset right now? Well, there was a surge that we just saw today in Bucharest and other areas of young voters. They saw what happened in early May during the first round, where although Simion didn't get a majority, Simion still got the leading vote total. And I think the young people said, our future is going to be absolutely destroyed by this MAGA Putin candidate. Romania will be lost to Putin. So you saw this surge of young people voting. You saw this record turnout that nobody expected to see in Romania, and this led to the centrist, pro-democracy, pro-EU candidate pulling off this important upset, and an upset that was a further repudiation of Trump and Putin. Let me show you how France 24 was talking about this election just days ago. Here's how they described George Simion from the AUR, the MAGA Putin candidate, the far right-wing extremist. Play this clip.
The far-right candidate openly emulates American President Donald Trump. Nationalist and critical of elites in the media, he says he wants to restore Romania's greatness. In Bucharest, he sought to reassure businessmen that even though he has never been in government, he is fit to lead.
Nu mai trăim într-o dictatură. Nu mai poate cineva să ne pună pumnul în gură.
The AUR wants to remain in the European Union, but has proposed cutting off military aid to Ukraine.
We need to take care of our own interests and of our own citizens.
If the far right received 40% of the vote in the first round this month, it's also thanks to Călin Georgescu. The anti-vaccine, pro-Russian candidate won the first round of elections in November before it was annulled. Now under investigation for campaign abuses, Georgescu must report to the police once a week.
Our next sponsor has been a game changer for my family and me. If you get nauseous, you absolutely must get our next partner, Relief Band. Relief Band is the original anti-nausea wristband that quickly relieves and effectively prevents nausea and vomiting associated with motion. Promo code
Bucharest, Nicu Jordan are worried.
The country is turning to the extreme right, away from the European Union and towards the influence of Russia.
The independent candidate presents himself as anti-corruption. He says the campaign has been tough.
People don't have a lot of confidence in traditional media and are looking elsewhere. There's lots of information out there about me, and there's no verification.
The latest polls show the candidates in a near-dead heat with a slight advantage for the far right.
Let's take a look at how the local Bucharest coverage has been describing this surge in young voter turnout today. Here, play this clip.
The turnout has come to be a lot higher than people anticipated, especially among young people, the ages between 18 to 34. And those are really the numbers that everybody is here observing. Two types of votes: the votes of the young people who tend not to vote in as many numbers as they have chosen to come out this time, according to the electoral registry here in Romania. While on the other side, we did see George Simeon already cast shadow over these elections, basically stating that some 1.8 million dead people were still registered and eligible to vote, saying that he hopes that those people did not rise from the dead to cast their vote. While on the other side, Nicusor Dan has already said that as far as he's concerned, the votes that are coming in are being counted as they are coming in, and he sees no transparency issues in these elections as of this morning. The polls will close at some 9 p.m., but if these polls are challenged and additional doubts are casted on the electoral results, it may take days and possibly even weeks to get the results of this election.
I also thought one of the defining moments of this election was this clip that went viral right here of a Romanian woman singing the national anthem after casting her vote. A powerful moment unfolding at this polling station in Romania as a woman broke into song after voting, proudly singing the national anthem, recognizing that if the vote went for George Simeon, Romania would likely have been fully lost to Vladimir Putin. It would have become another satellite country of Putin, and fortunately, Romania said, not today. Here, watch this clip. Now, here's the iconic fountains in Bucharest, lighting up the colors of Europe and the European Union to celebrate their hard-fought victory over fascism. Long live Romania, long live Europe, Slava Ukraini. Play this clip. Now, it's also worth showing you as well this clip from earlier in the day of Bridget Brink, who recently quit her post as U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. And here she talks about how what Trump was doing was basically sucking up to Putin and selling out Ukraine and treating the victim, Ukraine, who suffered the unlawful invasion by Putin, as the aggressor. Here's why the ambassador to Ukraine quit her post. And I think this all ties into what we just saw in Bucharest with the Romania election. Play this clip.
You served this country for so many decades. What happened that made you say, I can't take it?
Well, maybe let me give you a little context. What I saw in Ukraine was horrifying. For 3 years, Russia launched missiles and drones at men, women, and children sleeping in their homes, tried to take down the energy grid for millions of Ukrainians, to take out the power, heat, and light in the middle of winter, and committed war crimes and atrocities at a level we haven't seen since World War II. I resigned from Ukraine and also from the Foreign Service because the policy since the beginning of the administration was to put pressure on the victim Ukraine rather than on the aggressor, Russia. I fully agree that the war needs to end, but I believe that peace at any price is not peace at all. It's appeasement. And as we know from history, appeasement only leads to more war.
And to be clear, you are a career diplomat. So that means you serve regardless of who is the president of the United States and what party they come from. And in fact, when you tried to leave post in January, Secretary Rubio asked you to stay on in Kyiv, as I understand it. You were there for a number of months until April. What specifically with this policy is a problem for you? Because you worked at post under the Trump administration. Was there a trigger that made you say, we're getting it so wrong?
Well, I would say it wasn't a hasty, rash decision. It was one that I took over the first 3 months of the administration. But the first sign was the Oval Office meeting.
In February, between President Trump and President Zelensky.
Yes, where I saw that our approach is to put pressure on Ukraine and not pressure on Russia.
So, folks, a major upset, but an important one for the sake of democracy, for the sake of rejecting Putin and MAGA. Romanian voters showed up despite the far right-wing candidate George Simion of the AUR winning the first round of elections early in May, which scared a lot of people into thinking that Romania was lost to fascism, to MAGA, to Putin. Young voters and other voters stood up for democracy, cast their votes in favor of Necușor Dan, the centrist mayor, soft-spoken man from Bucharest, who will go on to win this election. Now, we're going to follow up, of course, of what's going on with this claim, this lie, this kleptocratic playbook that's now being utilized by Russia and George Simion, claiming that they won when they lost, trying to incite violence. Romanians are not going to stand for this, but this is textbook Trumpy, Putin, loser behavior. Great work, Romania. You stood up for the world. It's a great day for democracy. Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 5 million subscribers.
New Midas merch drop. Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more. All at store.midastouch.com.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Belle again. So today, we're going to talk about Trump telling Walmart to eat his tariffs. Well, if it isn't the consequences of my own policies. The tariffs are forcing Walmart to raise prices, which is what economists said would happen, but Trump said wouldn't. Now, he's saying Walmart should just eat the tariffs and not raise prices. Saying, quote, Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs as the reason for raising prices throughout the chain. Walmart made billions of dollars last year, far more than expected. Between Walmart and China, they should, as is said, eat the tariffs and not charge valued customers anything. I'll be watching, and so will your customers. Eat my tariffs, man. Yes, Walmart makes billions. Walmart makes its money by moving hundreds of millions of items per day at very low net profit margins. But since they're doing such a high volume, they make a fortune. They have a very tiny net profit margin, but that's net profit margin. What about the gross profit margin, which is what they make over the cost of goods? It's normally about 25%, just a little bit under. The now effective tariff rate on products from China is 30%. Do the math. Add 30% to the cost. That would give Walmart a roughly negative 5% gross profit margin. Not raising prices will probably result in Walmart going into the red. Walmart is the largest private employer in the U.S. So since Trump didn't understand the impact of tariffs, despite every economist telling him, his new plan will probably result in layoffs. If they can't raise prices to meet the product cost, they have to cut other costs. I'm not saying this in defense of a multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation. I'm saying this to point out that if a giant like Walmart can't handle it without raising prices, there's zero chance for mom and pop places. Tariffs raise prices. That's their whole job. Even the 30% tariff, which Trump and company is trying to paint as moderate, is threatening America's largest retailer unless they raise prices. This was 100% predictable. It was predicted. The problem for MAGA on this one is that they've been so successful at just repeating the party line and wearing Americans down that they think they can do it with this. This is math. The math doesn't care about your rhetoric. If Trump's economic policies stand, Walmart has three options: raise prices, lay off people, or go under. Now let's say they cut staff and investments to keep prices the same. What happens next? They probably won't show growth, along with a bunch of other companies. What happens to their stock price if they don't show growth? When the market drops, people's retirements drop. The economy slows. Just like Trump's massive tariffs themselves, this will not work. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
Moi, je n'en reviens pas. Donc, mercredi, quand j'ai quitté Radio-Canada, j'avais 6 000 abonnés, une chaîne YouTube inexistante. Aujourd'hui, il y a presque 20 000 personnes qui me suivent et la chaîne YouTube, elle explose! Quelle 72 heures! Tu sais, quand j'ai décidé que j'aimerais ça faire ce move-là dans ma vie, j'espérais là, que le jour où j'avais le guts de le faire, puis que je fonçais, ben, qu'il y aurait plein d'articles de journaux, que les radios en parleraient, puis que ce serait la folie, puis que tout le monde me dirait « Yes, une précurseur! » Je rêvais à ça, moi. Puis que là, ça arrive. Je comprends pas. On se rappelle que j'ai quitté Radio-Canada mercredi midi. Je tourne ça en ce moment, on est samedi midi. On dirait que j'ai changé de vie. C'est vraiment quelque chose de vivre ça tout seul dans une chambre d'hôtel en Gaspésie. Je savais que le festival s'en venait, puis tu sais, c'est un des... Là, j'ai beaucoup cité Olivier Primo comme étant comme « Ah, quand j'ai vu faire ça pendant la campagne électorale, je me suis dit, il faut que je fasse ça. » OK, mais il y avait le festival de journalisme qui s'en venait. Puis le gros panel pour lequel j'étais invitée, c'était le panel « Les conquérants de l'information ». On était 4, puis il y avait juste moi qui venais d'un média institutionnel, OK? Puis je me disais... Je vais devoir aller défendre le fait de faire du journalisme numérique, que je suis une conquérante de l'information, mais à l'intérieur d'un média institutionnel, en sachant, dans le fond, que j'ai un projet de chaîne YouTube, en sachant que j'allais sûrement démissionner dans les prochaines semaines. Fait que je me suis dit non, il faut que la cassure se fasse comme maintenant. C'est ça que j'ai fait, mais ce que ça donne, c'est que je me ramasse dans un festival de journalisme à parler à plein de journalistes de ma décision, alors que ça fait juste 2-3 jours que je suis partie, puis je me trouve loin de chez nous. Mais bon, tout ça pour ne pas être fake sur le panel des conquérants de l'information, puis aussi de suivre mes rêves à fond la caisse, puis d'arrêter de perdre du temps. J'ai rencontré un grand YouTuber ici, Gaspard G, qui me dit « Ce qui serait vraiment cool, c'est que tu te présentes au début sur ta chaîne en répondant à tes haters. » Et ce qui est vraiment cool, c'est que j'ai eu de la difficulté à en trouver des haters. Mais j'en ai trouvé, parce qu'il y en a tout le temps. Donc, on répond aux gens qui sont fâchés de ma décision. Donc, Fogface nous demande « Pourquoi ne pas commencer tranquillement? Tu pars ton canal YouTube, mais tu gardes ta job. Tu peux vivre ton rêve sans tout perdre ton revenu. » J'y ai pensé. Quand tu es journaliste à Radio-Canada, tu ne peux pas faire une petite job en parallèle. Tu dois toujours être capable d'appliquer les normes et pratiques journalistiques, peu importe ce que tu ferais à l'extérieur de Radio-Canada. Puis moi, ben il y a des trucs que je vais faire qui vont pas à 100% respecter les normes. Puis ultimement, il y a aussi tout l'aspect que j'ai envie de vivre ce rêve-là à fond. Puis en travaillant 40 heures semaine, ça m'enlève quand même quelques heures de montage puis de tournage. C'est vraiment triste comme choix. Nous avions la chance de pouvoir se servir d'une vieille institution et elle avait réussi à nous accrocher. Voilà qu'elle nous dit qu'elle va être commanditée. Dommage. C'est gentil, puis en même temps, il y a une question sur mon modèle d'affaires. C'est sûr que j'adorais mon travail. Radio-Can me laissait full de liberté à produire du contenu cool à l'intérieur de l'institution radio-canadienne. Fait que moi, au début, je trouvais que c'était le meilleur de tous les mondes. Avec du recul, je me pose la question parce que juste en annonçant le move qu'il y aura plus ce logo-là en haut à droite sur mes vidéos, que je vais faire mes propres choses, ben cet engouement-là que les gens ont envers le projet me fait dire que c'est peut-être aussi une bonne chose des fois. Il y a des statistiques qui nous le démontrent, que les jeunes croient de moins en moins aux institutions. Moi, j'y crois à 100 000 à l'heure à notre diffuseur public, mais j'avais quand même une réflexion de me dire, ben s'il y a plein de gens qui y croient de moins en moins, est-ce que je devrais peut-être juste partir à mon compte? Il y a quand même toute cette gang-là qui fait de moins en moins confiance aux institutions que je vais peut-être pouvoir aller chercher puis les amener à s'informer. Je comprends le point, mais moi, je le vois positivement. Moi qui m'imaginais que d'obtenir un emploi de journaliste à Radio-Canada était le début d'une carrière florissante et incroyable. C'est totalement vrai. C'est totalement vrai. J'ai rencontré tellement de jeunes dans les derniers jours qui ont des stages à Radio-Canada pendant l'été, puis je leur dis qu'ils sont les plus chanceux du monde. Moi, je me pince d'avoir pu travailler toutes ces années-là à Radio-Can, puis je souhaite à plein de jeunes de faire leurs dents dans ces salles de nouvelles-là à travers le pays qui sont complètement incroyables. Je suis impatiente, j'avais le goût de tester d'autres choses, mais c'était le meilleur premier emploi en sortant de l'école de la planète, là. Et dans 2 semaines, on va apprendre qu'elle se lance dans l'équipe de Québec solidaire. Non. Je m'en vais pas en politique, mais bien vu et bien lancé. C'était une grosse semaine à Ici Québec. Outre sa famille et ses collègues, qui connaît cette personne? C'est qui, elle, une nouvelle star québécoise? J'espère. Si c'est pour que vous vous informiez plus, puis qu'on grandisse tous et qu'on rattrape les Français sur notre retard en information sur le web, ben, j'espère que je suis une nouvelle star. Mon chum m'a envoyé un commentaire. Un autre saucé.
Democrats are trying desperately to chart their path forward and take on Donald Trump, but they keep getting steamrolled by the specter of the last president. Newly released audio from an interview between former President Biden and special counsel Robert Hur is again putting Biden's diminished mental capacity as a president on display. At the time, Hur was investigating Biden for retaining classified documents during his time as vice president. Here's the moment from the 2023 interview where
I'm joined now by Beto O'Rourke. Thanks so much for joining me.
Good to be with you.
So you've been hosting a series of town halls across the state of Texas, and you've done this before. You've obviously ran for the U.S. Senate in 2018. You ran for governor in 2022. And so how do these town halls right now feel different from even previous election cycles where Democrats were overperforming, like in 2018?
I think like a lot of people right now, I'm just trying to do whatever I can to be helpful. And I just know from the Senate race in 18, the governor's race in 22, we just have this ability to bring people together. And importantly, not just Democrats. So, Austin, Dallas, Houston, we got to be there. But we've been in Mansfield, we've been in Amarillo, we've been in Wichita Falls, we've been in Denton, Texas. These are the places, frankly, that have been either taken for granted by Republicans or written off by Democrats, and folks are going unrepresented and unheard. So showing up, not only am I learning a lot from the people who attend these town halls, but everyone in attendance is getting to hear each other. Folks know that they're not alone when 750 other people show up in Amarillo, Texas, or that person who, for whatever reason, isn't a veteran, didn't serve their country. They get to listen to the man in Wichita Falls who says, how is cutting 83,000 jobs from the VA? Most of them, by the way, will be veterans who will lose their jobs. Yeah. How is that going to help me get in and see somebody for my service-connected disability or my behavioral health appointment? There's a lot of power in bringing people together. And it does feel a lot like 2017. When I first got out there on the road, people understand clearly what is happening to this country, undermining the Constitution, the rule of law, the attacks on our fellow Americans, especially the most vulnerable. And they want to see us fight, all of us. And I think this false choice being offered to Democrats, are you going to be more moderate, more centrist? Right. Are you going to be more progressive? It's a wrong question. Are you going to surrender or are you going to fight? People want us to fight.
It has felt for so long like the intra-party feud has been whether you're progressive, whether you're a more moderate Democrat, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. And I hope that there is some understanding that it's okay if you are progressive and you're representing a progressive district. It's okay if you're more moderate. I mean, Jared Golden is not going to win in AOC's district and vice versa. She's not going to win in his district, and that's okay. That's the curse and the blessing of being in a big tent party, is that if you want everybody from, Joe Manchin to Bernie Sanders in the party, then you have to be willing to accept and appreciate the stances of those very people. But now it feels different, because it feels like the overarching theme for Democrats, at least up to this point, has been that this party is really defined by its weakness, especially unto itself, but especially relative to a Republican Party that will stop at nothing to get what it wants. And they won't be bound by the Constitution. They won't be bound by the parliamentarian. They won't be bound by their own hypocrisy. I mean, we've watched as Mitch McConnell scoffed at the very notion that we could allow Merrick Garland to get a hearing because it was an election year, and yet ushered through Amy Coney Barrett's nomination even as votes had already been cast in that election cycle. And so is there some sense, at least among the people that you've spoken with, that this idea of moderate versus progressive takes a backseat to their willingness to actually show up and fucking fight for people?
Exactly. I mean, I think sometimes it can seem like the Democratic Party is more interested in being right or even in being polite than being in power. Whereas the Republican Party under Donald Trump cares more about power than anything else, to the point you made, more than the Constitution, more than our morals, our ethics, more about the criminal code. They just care about power, and that's it. And they've been very, very, very effective at it. And so to meet that challenge, I think we have to be absolutely focused, aggressive, even ruthless about winning power. And I think that needs to include the broadest possible coalition, a true united front where we no longer define ourselves along differences of geography, race, or where we are on the policy spectrum. We agree on this much, that we're very close to losing what Lincoln called the last best hope of Earth. And 249 years in, if it is our generation that meanly loses everything that everyone else has sacrificed and struggled and served to achieve, that is on us for eternity. And I know you and the people who are part of this movement are not having that. And so we've got to do everything we can with what we have, where we are, to fight back. And so That means coming to the town hall that we're hosting in East Dallas on Monday. It means showing up on the street corner with your neighbor who says, hey, I'm just going to protest on the corner of Mesa and Sunland Park. I hope people show up. I hope somebody sees this sandwich board. I hope it moves somebody. You know, not to invoke something that can be trite, because I think it actually is profound at this moment. You know, Robert Kennedy, the good, the senior, in his Ripples of Hope speech, he talks about, you know, this question that's on everyone's mind. Who am I against this concentration of power in the hands of the president or in the oligarchs or these billionaire masters of algorithm and influence? What am I against all of that? And Kennedy in that speech says, look, you do this thing. You send out this little ripple of hope because you have the courage of your convictions. You stood up to be counted. And that ripple is going to meet somebody else's ripple. And they're going to continue to meet until there is a current that can break down the mightiest walls of oppression. That's what's happening in this country right now. So to those who took a chance and showed up at the hands-off marches or coming to these town halls or protesting or marching or doing whatever they can, not waiting for the DNC or people in elected office to give them orders, God bless you. That's what's going to save the country. It is not going to be the people in traditional positions of power. It is going to be the people at large, and that's got to be all of us.
Beto, are you hearing from folks in these town halls who you've spoken with who might have remained a Republican even throughout the blue wave election of 2018, even during Trump's second unsuccessful run for president in 2020? People who, despite all of that, were Republicans and yet now see something different happening within the Republican Party, see something different happening to our democracy, and are changing their political affiliation or are showing openness to supporting Democrats. Anecdotal though this may be, still just curious what you're seeing actually on the ground talking to these people.
People in 2024, by and large, wanted change. And there was, whether we think this is fair or accurate or honest, there was one candidate who really embodied that change. Like, I'm going to drain the swamp. I'm going to blow the place up. I'm going to confound the Constitution. I'm going to undermine everything that you hold dear because this thing, this system, this apparatus isn't working for you.
Yeah.
And we cannot judge, and we should totally understand how people made that decision. I'm getting $7.25 an hour in Texas. I can't afford to see a doctor.
Right. You have one party that's largely defending institutions and the other party that isn't. And those institutions are not working for those people. And so how can you expect those people to defer to the side that says, keep the institutions intact?
Exactly. But to your question, I think many of those who in good faith voted for Donald Trump have found that this change is not at all what they were looking for. And instead of making their lives better, he's enriching himself and his cronies. And the things that matter most to them in their lives are not improving. They're not changing at all because he's totally focused on himself and on those like him. I'm seeing those people. I mentioned being in Amarillo, Texas. So Amarillo is in two different counties. Potter County voted for Trump 80%. Randall County voted for Trump 72%. The place was packed, more than 750 people there, including guys 2 rows back wearing Make America Great Again hats. And they weren't there to protest. They had their arms crossed. They were listening. And then, by the end of the town hall, I see their heads nodding, not necessarily at what I'm saying, but at what their neighbors in Amarillo are saying. This woman stands up, shaky voice, not used to public speaking, and says, my 12-year-old daughter, who has significant disabilities, when Trump cuts the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that's going to target her. She's going to be ending up in some warehouse. And this woman said, I'm a mama bear, and I'm going to do everything I can to fight for her. And so she told us that she lives in Canyon, Texas, not too far from Amarillo. And I said, okay, ma'am, when does the Canyon Independent School District Board of Trustees meet? We found out it meets Monday at 7 p.m. I said, anyone near Canyon, Texas, you go have her back Monday at 7 p.m. Let's see if those trustees will vote to fill the gap now that Trump has turned his back on this community. I never asked her party affiliation.
Yeah.
I didn't ask the affiliation of anybody there. But not only did those 750 people hear her story and understand the consequence of Donald Trump, but everyone who picked up the Amarillo paper the next day or watched broadcast television, they saw that people were showing up for one another at this moment of truth. So yeah, I do think we, not we the Democratic Party, not we Beto O'Rourke, I just think we the people who are stepping up at this moment of truth, I think we're making a difference right now. And I think we're connecting with those voters who want change. Now we have to be able to deliver for them.
Right. And be the party that actually embraces change instead of blindly deferring to the same institutions that I think largely have not worked for people in the past. I want to dig into Texas a little bit because, you know, Texas is like the gift for, you know, Democrats. I mean, once we are able to flip Texas, and I think that it's and I hope that it's a when, not if, but then the whole map obviously changes. And it was looking more and more from 2018 to 2020 to 22 like Democrats were chipping away at the Republicans' lead and that we were only, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 cycles away. And then, of course, come 2024, that lead widens again. And that's commensurate with what we've seen in the rest of the country. But it is still a step back. And so I'm just curious how you see the landscape in Texas that did look really favorable to Democrats and less favorable to Republicans that kind of did revert back to the mean a little bit.
In 2030, there'll be a new census for this country. And in that year, we'll learn that Texas picks up population.
Yeah.
And much of the Midwest and Northeast loses population.
And where we are right now in California.
Absolutely. And so by the presidential election in 2032, which will be upon us before we know it, you could win as a Democrat every single one of the so-called blue wall states, and you'll still lose the White House.
Yeah.
If you can't pick up Texas and the Sun Belt. And you cannot pick up Texas and the Sun Belt if you start working on it in 2032 or 2030 or 2028.
Right.
You got to work on it today. So our group, Powered by People, we're out there registering likely Democrats on college campuses, the very population that's targeted by the Republicans in power for disenfranchisement. Not only registering them, but staying in touch with them to guide them all the way through the election process. It's the most voter suppressive state in the union, so we've got to work harder than anywhere else in the union. But to your great question, and kudos to you for being on this, not today in 2025, the first time I ever talked to you. 8 years ago, you were asking about Texas because you saw the potential, the value, and also the necessity of this state sooner or later. If we don't get some help from the outside, we're fucked.
Yeah.
Not we in Texas, but we, the United States of America. In 2020, to use an example, the Democrats nationally spent about $28 per voter turning them out in Georgia. In the state of Texas, $7 per voter. I raised, thanks to many of your listeners and viewers, a lot of money, $7, $25 at a time running for governor. I think $80 million all told. Greg Abbott, the guy I was running against, spent $130 million all told. And that's before independent expenditures and other statewide Republicans spent money in those campaigns. Look, I hate money in politics. Money is not everything. There are a lot of other factors and qualities that we've got to consider. But until we start putting our money where our mouth is and start investing in places like Texas, then we're going to continue to lose them. And it won't just hurt the people of Texas. And it's absolutely killing us literally in Texas. The most obscene abortion ban in America, the least insured state in America, leading the nation in school shootings in America. All of that is happening in Texas, but that is a future coming to you if we don't turn this around. So there is no state, in my opinion, more important than Texas. We're doing our part in state, but now we need the rest of the country to come in and help us out as well.
And real talk right now, like, is the DNC, and you're not here representing the DNC, nor am I, is the Democratic Party doing what it needs to do to hold its own in Texas, or still not?
No. And look, if we've learned anything from 2024, we got to just be really honest if at times we hurt people's feelings about what has worked and what hasn't worked. And what hasn't worked is this really cynical strategy to pick 6 or 7 states and put billions of dollars into those states and leave everyone else to their own devices, to wither on the vine, which has happened in parties across the country. I was just in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The University of Alabama students invited me to be there because Trump had imposed himself on their commencement ceremonies. He wanted to outshine their hard work and their achievement. And they said, Trump is not us. This is not what we want the world to see. Hey, Beto, will you and Doug Jones and anyone else who would like to come down and speak to the moment? That was so encouraging to me because they weren't taking orders from central headquarters. They're not supposed to be relevant in today's Democratic Party, but they're a proud people, just like you are here in California, just like we are in Texas, and they want to be heard, they want to be listened to, and they want to lead.
Yeah.
And frankly, they're doing a better job of leading than a lot of the folks who are supposed to be leading us right now out of Washington, D.C. So if there's a silver lining in all of this, I think in the broken apparatus of today's Democratic Party nationally, there will emerge these real leaders whose names we don't even know right now in places like Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or in Amarillo, Texas. And they're going to speak to the moment, and they will carry the urgency that this crisis demands. And I think in the end, we're going to be okay. And I'm optimistic because I'm seeing and listening to these people everywhere I travel right now.
And I'm curious about that because, I mean, I know that you have optimism, and that's why it's so great to listen to you. There are, at the same time, I'm sure a lot of people, I'm sure that you're even encountering a lot of people, myself included, who are cynical about what to expect, now that we're in a moment where we have a lawless president who has no concern for what the Constitution says. He's right now defying a unanimous Supreme Court ruling. We have a Republican Party in Congress that is completely pliable, completely obsequious as far as Trump is concerned. So he has complete compliance with the legislative branch, with the judicial branch, the top of the judicial branch. He has a DOJ that exists to serve, to do whatever he wants them to do. And so where do you draw faith from in a moment where things do seem so grim and there isn't much to have hope for, at least outwardly?
Two things, and I hold on to these two things because I'm also tempted to despair given the facts that you just laid out. One is to remember who we are, what we're made of, and where we come from. We have been tested so many times over the last 249 years, from the very beginning at Lexington and Concord to deciding the issue of abolition and slavery, and 300,000 plus lives sacrificed to end that. The brave men and women from communities like this one who served and fought in World War II, including on the beaches of Normandy in 1944 to repel fascism, to defend democracy here at home. The civil rights and voting rights leaders and marchers, some of whom gave their lives as well, right, to establish what is close to a true democracy and really the exception in the history of the world, and really, I think, still the exception on the planet today. When I think about it that way, like you and I, we are the heirs to all of that sacrifice that came before us. We can't be found wanting at this moment of truth. As hard as it is, they went through some stuff that I would argue is even tougher against even greater odds. So we remember that. And then here's the second thing, which is we have got to find ourselves in the action that is being demanded of us right now. When I'm on a college campus, and it can be, Texas hot, 105 degrees, muggy. I'm in Houston at TSU. But I'm out there registering voters and listening to people and connecting with other volunteers. By the end of that day, though my shirt is soaked through, I'm completely exhausted. I have never been happier because I'm not on the sidelines. I'm not watching this happen to us. I'm not waiting for some cavalry to ride to our rescue. I am part of the answer. And maybe I registered 8 voters that day, but that's 8 more people who are on the rolls. And I know these other volunteers empowered by people are doing their part as well. And soon enough, if we're persistent and we're patient and we meet this moment the way history is calling us to meet this moment, we're going to overcome and we're going to get through this. So that sustains me. That keeps me going. If I fail to do those two things, to remember who we are and to do the work necessary, then I succumb to that temptation. But action is the antidote to despair. Action is the key to victory.
Real quick, I've worked with Powered by People before. Can you just explain how, for people who want to donate or to contribute, give anything at all to Powered by People, how can they do that?
Yeah, so this is an extraordinary organization comprised of volunteers. I'm a volunteer myself, unpaid. And we train our volunteers to become volunteer deputy registrars in Texas.
Which is especially difficult in Texas. The whole system is set up to make it damn near impossible to make sure that you can get anybody registered to vote.
After the 2013 Shelby versus Holder decision, which